All right, here I go, guys. I'm gonna cue the music. All right there. Hey there, data lovers, and welcome to another episode of I Love Data Fridays here at the International Data Evaluation Center on the campuses of the Ohio State University. And ladies and gentlemen, we're bringing a special edition of I Love Data Fridays today, and we are going to be talking about our reading recovery follow-up study with our researchers from the Center for Research and Education and Social Policy at the University of Delaware. And hey, who do you got talking data to you today? Well, of course, you've got me, Jeff Breimer-Bashore, our Director of IT and Operations and Principal Investigator here today at the IDEC. And then I'm also being joined by Akeisha Sarfo and Allie Blakeney. Allie, Akeisha, you guys there?
Yes, we are. Good afternoon, everybody.
All right. Good to hear you guys. All right. So let me talk about sort of the agenda for today. We are going to start with a presentation about the follow-up study and specifically focusing on our cohort number 4. And then we will do a question and answer session at the end. And to submit questions, all you have to do is go to the address www.slido.com, and then you just put in the event number X171, and we will be able to see your questions online. And with that, we're going to talk a little data, and I'm going to turn it right over to Akeisha and Allie. All right, guys, I give it to you.
So, and I just wanted to start by saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, they can always come back to this link to hear this webinar again, correct?
That's right. If you have a colleague that wasn't able to make it today, they can come back, and this is the same link that will play a recorded version of today's webinar.
Great. So yes, I'm Akeisha Sarfo. Many of you have heard my voice before. You've gotten an email from me before, but some of you may not. So today we're going to talk about cohort 4 portion of our reading recovery follow-up study. The purpose of this study is to follow up on an initial study of reading recovery. It was a scale up that was done back in 2000, funding starting in 2010-11, where we looked at the impacts of reading recovery for first grade students' literacy, and we found rigorous evidence that reading recovery does truly indeed impact students' learning of literacy. And this study now follows up to examine if the impacts are sustained through 3rd and 4th grades. It's a 3-year study. It's funded by IES. And so we are in the 4th cohort of this study. And if you can recall, if you're on this call, you are a teacher leader for a school, or possibly even a teacher for a school that has at least 7 reading recovery and 2 TNI students in that cohort for a year, which is the 14-15 school year. Right. So those students would have been in, am I right? I think so. Yeah, so the students would have been, okay, thank you. So the students would have been in 1st grade in 2014-15. So that was cohort 4. Who's responsible for collecting these data? So the whole purpose of today's talk to talk about a pre-survey, which is where you can designate who will be collecting the data. It can be yourself as a teacher leader, or it can be a teacher at the school right now. Whoever is designated as the data collector will receive a $75 gift card from Amazon for the collection of the data. So we'll be collecting both survey data and test score data, and we'll talk about that data in a little bit more detail later. So if you collect both of those sets of data for a school, you get the $75 gift card. If you have more than one school, you'll receive a $75 gift card for each of those schools. So like I said, yes, we are in cohort 4 data collection. We're starting here in January. You have until March 15th to complete both sets of data collections and uploading with the test scores, as well as the survey, as well as complete with the survey. So today, as I said, we'll talk about the pre-survey. Jeff will go over how to upload your test scores into IDEC, and then Allie will walk us through the survey, the student school survey. So for the pre-survey, once again, the purpose is for you to designate who will be collecting data for each of the schools in this portion of the survey. And it looks a little bit like this. So you'll receive a link on Monday. Links for the pre-survey will go out on Monday, so please look out for them. If you do not receive one, please let me know, but they should go out Monday morning. The language at the top just briefly introduces the study. If you do not have a person to collect data for that school, you can simply put in, right here, you can put in for the first name NA, last name NA, and email address na@nowhere.edu. But you will not be able to go through the survey, complete the pre-survey without putting something in each box. So for school one, for instance, it will tell you the name of the school, and then it will also list the names of the students that were in that school, that were in reading recovery, or were a TNI student in that 2014-15 school year. And then you'll put here, and first name, last name, email address, who will collect the data for that school. If you have more than one school, just scroll down and you will see the next school following that first school. And then at the end of the page, which I guess we don't show that here, but at the end of, after all your schools are listed, there's a continue button. And so some people don't scroll all the way down. So remember to scroll all the way down this screen and you'll see a continue button. That will take you to your kind of final screen that says thank you and that your response has been recorded. So you'll know when you've completed the survey if you've seen this screen. And that's all we're asking for the pre-survey. That just helps us know, one, who to send the actual survey to, and two, who to send the gift card to once the data has been collected. So Jeff, if you want to go ahead and talk about the test scores.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and talk about that. All right. All right, do you guys have a slide for me there, or?
Yes.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and flip over to the next slide.
Can you see your screen?
Yes, it might not be updating on my screen. Oh, I see, okay. No, we're good. All right, folks, as you can tell, Akeisha and I have totally rehearsed for today. So, ladies and gentlemen, so what I'm going to talk about is that Akeisha, we, as a part of the data collection, we're going to be asking teachers and teacher leaders to collect test scores on follow-up data for kids in their third and fourth grades. And these test scores will be used to look at the longer-term impacts of reading recovery, and then to look at, how much variability there is in these long-term impacts between the schools in reading recovery. All right. And Keisha, why don't you go ahead and move to the next one there. So like I said, we're going to be collecting test scores for children and from third and fourth grade. Their scaled scores in reading and English language arts on their state assessments. We will be asking for the name of the test, the score, and then if the data is missing, just a brief explanation of why the data are missing. And that can be just simply things like, child moved from school. It doesn't have to be a long story or anything. And these data will be submitted directly to IDEC. And I'm going to take a second here and show you how to do that. Let me bring over a web browser in my window. So the way that your teachers will enter these follow-up scores is they will simply go to the IDEC website, log on, and then they will come on to the right-hand side of the screen, left-hand side, I'm sorry, where they see the school year drop-down box. And they will select 2014-15 from that box. This will refresh their screen here. And they will see a column that says U of Delaware Follow-Up. And they should only see it for their reading recovery and tested, not instructed students. And they will then click on a student, on one of those pages for a student. And then you will see a total of 8 questions. There are four that are related to third grade on the left-hand side, and 4 that are related to fourth grade on the right-hand side. They each have the same set of questions. The first one in each section merely just asks, which assessment was given. We have a list of pre-generated list of assessments already that we've gotten from the other cohorts. If you don't find yours in there, you can select Other, and then in question number 2, you can type in the name of that assessment. In both cases, if it's for children who did get an assessment, and question number 3 or the third question in each group, you will merely type in the student's scale score for that. If the child's score is missing, at the very bottom of that assessment list, there is a none. You can select none. And then in the last question of each group of questions, you can just type in a brief explanation of why the student's data are missing. And once again, we don't need to know a lot of information. Just simply state, child has moved out of district, or whatever the reason might be. All right, Akeisha, why don't I have you go to the next slide there? Okay, good. All right. So when that is done and your teachers have entered the data, teacher leaders, let me quickly just click on a button here real quick. They can just click the Save button. They don't have to submit it to you. They just need to click the Save button, and that will put it, save it directly into the IDEC database. The data can be entered either by teacher leader or teacher. The only cases where we're going to have to have a teacher leader to enter the data is when the teacher who originally collected the data on the students is no longer a part of reading recovery. So in that case, we'll have the teacher leader enter it. And teacher leaders, you'll have to do an extra step yourself. I'm going to show you there. I'm going to click on a blank student's record. Let's find one of a student that is not associated with my fake students here. Don't have a good one to show you. So I am just going to re-explain it here real quick. You will find that if teacher leaders, if you're entering data for a teacher who's no longer in reading recovery, you'll first have to click the Acquire button. I'm not showing it on my screen here, but you will see it. Once you click the Acquire button, you will have the option to answer the questions and then click Save to put it in, to save it into our database. And that's it. I think, Akeisha, I turn it back over to you.
Great, thank you so much. And I just want to reiterate, you had this question before, that you're collecting the scale score from your standardized state assessment. So those should be in the Dropbox for the most part, and if not, you can go ahead and enter those. And this is for reading and ELA only. This is not math, this is not overall. These are your reading or ELA scale scores from your standardized state standardized assessment. I just want to make sure that's clear. And you can start uploading your test score data as soon as possible, actually. So if you know who the data collector is, and they're ready to go, if you are the data collector, you can go ahead and start uploading that test score data before you start the survey. And actually, that's a prerequisite of going through the survey. You have to have uploaded test score before you can continue through the survey. So the survey is a school and student survey. The reason why we ask questions through the survey is so that we can look and see if variability persists. If the impacts can be explained by school level or student level factors, and if performance monitoring or interventions help explain any of those differences or impacts that we see from first through fourth grade. And so the survey includes kind of 2 different parts. One's about school characteristics. We'll be asking about changes in administration. And then the other part looks at students, whether they've been retained since first grade, whether they've received an IEP or placed in the IEP, or whether they were continuously monitored, and then whether and what literacy interventions they've received since first grade. And I'm going to hand it over to Allie, who is going to walk us through the survey.
Hello. So for those who have worked with the survey in the past, particularly cohorts 2 and 3, this is going to look very similar. Not much has changed. However, for those new to the survey, I'm going to be walking through screenshots of what the survey will look like, as well as individual questions that you will be receiving and that we are requesting your help collecting data for. So you'll first receive an invitation to complete the survey via email. It'll include a message about the survey, and at the very bottom, it will include a URL that is your individualized link for whatever school you're going to be collecting data for. If you have either selected yourself or nominated someone else to complete survey data for more than one school, they will receive multiple emails. So each URL link is specific only to one school. So once you click on that link, the first screen you will see is this. Please note that the survey has two sections. The first, we're just asking you who you can actually help answer questions on. And depending on your answers, students that you're able to find data for will continue through the survey. Those you cannot will drop out, so you won't be continued to ask questions about them. And then section 2 is collecting data on those students that you can find. So first, you'll be presented with a list of students with their IDEC student number. And for the purposes of this webinar, obviously we're working with fake data, so Winnie the Pooh will not be listed as one of your students. But for the school that you click the URL for, this will auto-populate with all the students for that school. And then we are asking that you first submit your standardized test scores for all students via the IDEC website before continuing on to the survey. So your first question will be asking you if you have already completed this task or not. If yes, if you select yes, you will be routed on to other survey questions. And if you select no, you will receive this screen with the link to the IDEC website, and as well as contact information if you have any questions on how to do the survey, or not the survey, the test score upload. Once the test scores have been uploaded, you will click on the confirmation button highlighted here in blue, and then hit continue, and you'll be redirected towards the rest of the survey questions. And you'll see the same screen that you would have if you had selected yes to begin with. So first up is our section 1, where we're asking where these students have gone, because we're aware that students tend to move to and fro. So all of your students will be listed, and there will be 3 options: whether or not they continue to attend the school in the most recent academic year, whether they attended a different school in the same district, and if you simply cannot locate the student at all for the most recent academic year. If you select that they attended a different school, you will see the screen where you'll be asked if you can actually collect data on those students. We realize that just because they're in the same district doesn't necessarily mean that you have their data. So you'll have a chance to clarify yes or no. If you select no here, or on the prior screen, if you indicate that you cannot locate a student, those students will drop out from the survey and you will no longer be asked questions about them. If you answer yes here, or say that they attended the same school, those students will be included in all survey questions going forward. So after you have identified which students you can and cannot collect data for, you'll be directed to section 2, which is just our overall survey, like school and student characteristics section and questions. So it's going to be the same questions as you have seen in prior cohorts if you have done a survey before. However, we do have a bit of a change that I would like to highlight. So at the top of this section, you will see the following text. even though we build the data, even though we build the survey, our survey is actually hosted by a third-party vendor, and they've recently changed some of their system requirements. So for anyone who has done survey entry in the past, you know that data was automatically saved as you went through each question, and every click that you made, it was saved. However, our vendor is no longer doing that because they've grown to the point that they no longer have the capacity. So they only save data on a screen after it has been advanced to a new screen. So for example, if you're seeing this screen, the data on these prior screens has already been saved and you don't have to worry about it. However, the questions on this page, it's a long page because we wanted to make it viable for you for a couple of reasons that I'll mention in a second. But because it's a long page, and the next screen after this is simply asking you if you are ready to submit the data, we've had issues with folks entering data, coming back to the URL and finding that everything that they've entered on the screen is gone, poof, no longer existent. So to combat this, we've created a fake screen that you can advance to from this page that will just say this is for our saving purposes only, nothing that you really need to do, but it will allow you to advance onto that screen. So if you are not done with your survey data, you can come back and hit the back button from that screen, back to the screen, and you'll be able to continue your data input. However, there is a caveat. You are only allowed to advance to the next screen if you have inputted the questions that have a required data element. So those are going to be the first 4 questions, which is the administration, whether or not the administration changed, what grade level the student was in over a 3-year period, whether the student had IEP designations, and for what academic years, and then whether or not the student was continuously monitored. So the only thing that is basically not required on the screen is for the literacy interventions that each student received. So because of that, we highly recommend that you do not enter data for those on the screen at all until you have all data that you need for those 4 questions, because we don't want you to be wasting your time entering just to have the system to do that. So the good news about having the screen having all these questions on one screen is that you can print out these pages in your web browser, and you can collect data and write on the hard copy, do whatever you need to do, take it around to ask other teachers questions about literacy interventions or IEP or whatever. So all of the remaining survey questions are going to be in one place, and that's why we've decided to go ahead and do this weird workaround with the with the fake save screen instead of breaking these off. Because from what we've heard from student data collector feedback is that they really appreciate having all the questions on one screen when it comes to student level data. So that said, if you scroll further down the page, the first question that you will see is whether or not the school administrator changed between 3 years. And we've had questions about this in the past, and the main reason that we're asking this question is to see whether or not there was consistency across the administrative staff while the student was at the school, or schools if they're within a different school in the same district. And if students change buildings, for example, like if you have a school that's more decentralized and each building has its own administrator, and students change between these administrator buildings, that's not quite you can just go ahead and say, no, the administrator does not change, as long as the administrative staff in that building did not change. So we're looking at this at a higher level, and we just want to make sure that there's consistency among the administrative staff, not necessarily whether or not the student was exposed to different administrative staff in the same school. The next question is asking what grade level the following reading recovering students were in for each academic year. The purpose behind this question is we're trying to see if students were either retained or if they skipped grades. So for each of the 3 school years that you see here, there's a drop down for each student for each year, and it will have grades listed that are age appropriate. So the first column, as you see, it lists 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade. The next column will list grades 1st through 4th, and the last column will list grades 1st through 5th. So this should incorporate any students that managed to skip or if they're retained. The next question asks whether a student has an IEP designation. This is a simple yes, no, and it is for 3 academic years. And you will have to select yes, no for each of the 3 years for each student. And the last of our required questions asks if the student was continuously monitored for reading issues over 3 academic years. Similar to the prior question, you will have to answer yes, no for each student for each year. And after you've completed this section, you would now be able to hit continue at the bottom of the screen to go to that save page. So the last set of questions that you will be asked is the literacy interventions that each individual student that you were able to locate. It's looking at, this question is asking what literacy interventions each student received for each academic year. So this list is pre-populated with about 40 common interventions, and there's also 3 other options at the bottom where you can text enter any literacy interventions that you do not see listed here. There's at the very bottom of the list, there's also a none option, and we do ask that if the student did not receive any interventions for any or all years, that you do select the none, so that way we know that the student didn't receive anything and not that it wasn't necessarily that you couldn't find information. Each of these squares are checkboxes, so you can click as many or as few interventions as required. Now this is the save screen that I mentioned earlier. Again, you can access it after you have entered data for the first 4 questions on the pass screen. Once you get to this page, you can now click, you can exit from the survey from your browser, and when you click on the URL, you will be brought back here, and all data that you entered on the prior page will have been saved. If you've already gone through and entered all the data that you need to, there's no further surveys from this, there's no further questions from this point on, so you can just go ahead and click continue. And this is the last screen that you will see before you submit your survey. Please note that once you submit the survey, it is gone out of our hands and we cannot reactivate it. So if you need to make any changes after submission, we would have to go through and create a brand new survey. So please make sure that all of your data is finalized and you have no remaining questions or outstanding missing data before hitting continue. This is kind of your last shot. And if you do need to make any changes, just hit back and you can scroll through all the data pages and question pages before this. So once you do hit continue, you will receive a thank you screen, and you can ignore the hyperlink here. This was an old screenshot that I forgot to update, so that's my fault. So you will have already submitted your students' test data, so there is nothing further that you will need from here on out. Once you see the screen, all data collection activities are done for you for this particular school.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ali. I think the takeaways here are, I think the main takeaways are that the system is not automatically saving your data this time around. So I highly recommend, especially for those who are in more remote areas where maybe your Wi-Fi or your internet connections aren't as strong, to really write down your responses. And I think that's just the safest write down your answers to the survey questions. I think that's just the safest way to do this if you can. If not, you can go ahead and use that kind of save screen that we've provided for you. Um, and also, I was going to talk about this later, but it's probably appropriate to bring it up now. We've included all of these survey questions in a document that you can reference from now on. It's in our frequently asked website that we have for the study. And you can just click on that so you'll know exactly what questions that the survey asks ahead of time. And you can go ahead and just start to prepare to collect that data ahead of time. Write it down if you need to, and if not, however you want to do it, as long as you know that it will not necessarily save your data until you advance to the next screen. So moving forward though, the timeline is on Monday, you will receive your pre-survey. Please designate a data collector for this cohort 4 portion of the study. You can also start to upload your test score data into IDAC starting today if you'd like. And you'll have until you have a week to complete that. I should have put that there. You have a week to complete the pre-survey. All that language will be in the email you receive on Monday, but you'll have a week to complete the pre-survey. And then everyone will be asked to join us for another webinar on Thursday, January 31st. So that would be whoever is collecting the data. So it may not be yourself, but whoever you designate as a data completer. So just so that everyone is aware of what will be included in the survey and the next steps, there'll be a webinar January 31st at 3 o'clock. Then the launch of the actual survey will begin February 4th, and you'll have until March 15th to complete that. So that's about 6 weeks. So remember that we asked for the uploading of test score data prior to the completion of the survey. These are some of our information or our websites that provide information about the study. The first one is basically about the follow-up study. The second one is about the data collection activities. And then this frequently asked questions page, I definitely recommend. It'll probably answer a lot of questions before you need to email us. But that's also where the document is that has all of the questions that are in the survey that I highly recommend that you download and prep yourselves with before you start to actually enter the survey starting February 4th. And so that's all we have. If you have any questions, you can always reach us at press-rr@uw.edu.
All right, we will see if anything pops up on the question screen here. We'll give it a couple seconds. So Keisha, I'm like desperately trying to think of sort of the usual things that we talk about while we wait to see if any questions come in. I think I tend to say during this sort of time is that if you're not sure who to email with a question or a concern, you can always start with the IDEC help desk, and we'll make sure it gets to the right person and everything. So just, I'll say that.
I know I've gotten this one recently. How soon after they complete the data do they get their gift card? So we do not actually send out gift cards until our data collection period has ended, and it's probably 2 weeks after that. So in this case, we'll probably begin sending out incentives around April 1st.
Okay. Still nothing yet. We'll give it about another 15, 20 seconds here, see if anything rolls in.
Oh, and one more thing about gift cards. So we are not able to split the gift card. So if one individual enters the test score data and one individual does the survey data, please just send us the name of whoever has been agreed upon to receive the gift card, and you guys can split it accordingly. However, we are only allowed to send one $75 gift card to one contact that's given.
And I think I'll just end on a plea to really support the data collection efforts this time. We're really hoping for a really high response rate. These students would have been in our most recent cohort, so 2014-15. So we're hoping that you're able to more easily find the data on those students. So your participation would be greatly appreciated.
All right, guys. Well, I'm not seeing anything rolling in any questions here. I'm assuming it's because we're all veteran follow-up data collectors by this cohort in the study. So, so let me switch some slides around here and hit F5 to get that started. So, all right. Well, Keisha and Allie, I will say thank you again for taking your time today to explain all of the intricacies of data collection and everything with the follow-up study. All right, so let me cue the outro music here then. All right, folks, I want to say thank you to you for listening to another episode of I Love Data Fridays. And hey, we will talk data to you later.